The aviator goggles, the leather flying cap, the scarf at her neck, the leather bomber jacket. This is Amelia Earhart, a woman who broke flying records and is celebrated for both her contributions to the advancement of women and aviation.
She was such an icon, and her images are so kind of burned into our psyche, from what we learned in school about her to the images we see in museums.
Someone who lived beyond herself and left us a legacy of just her pure spirit.
We have either heard her name before or seen her in the numerous pictures, books, and films she appeared in. This liberal and adventurous spirit also led to her tragic, mysterious disappearance, though, which still lays unsolved to this day. What really happened to her? Where did she go? But most importantly, who was Amelia Earhart? Who was the woman behind the wheel?
The disappearance of Amelia Earhart, one of America's biggest mysteries, may finally be solved.
On flight around the world by way of the equator, Miss Amelia Earhart was lost in mid-ocean.
It's one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of all time. Where is the wreckage of Amelia Earhart's plane?
Some people believe two of the figures might be Earhart and her navigator, Fred Newman.
The larger view of Amelia is what she did in aviation.
It's possible through Amelia Earhart to dream of something that is bigger than yourself.
She didn't care what people thought of her. She just did it for her own joy and be happy.
It's the 24th of July, 1897, in Atchison, Kansas, USA. Amelia Mary Earhart is born. Her parents are the railroad attorney Edwin Earhart and Amelia Amy Otis. She also has a little sister named Muriel. Edwin and Amy have a complicated relationship. His alcohol addiction makes the family get into a financial crisis. Therefore, they have to move to Amelia's maternal grandparents' home. There, Amelia and Muriel seek out adventures, exploring the neighborhood, climbing trees, hunting for rats, and taking breathtaking rides on Amelia's sled. Throughout her childhood, Amelia lives in many different cities of the US and attends many different schools, such as the Hyde Park High School in Chicago and the Yoggins School in Rydell, Pennsylvania. Her father's inability to be the provider for the family leads Amelia to become more independent and not rely on someone else to take care of her. In 1918, Amelia visits her sister Muriel over Christmas in Toronto, Canada. After seeing wounded soldiers returning from World War I, she volunteers as a nurse's aide for the Red Cross at the Spadina Military Hospital. During her time as a nurse's aide, she develops a strong admiration for aviators, spending much of her free time watching the Royal Flying Corps practicing at the airfield nearby. In 1919, Amelia enrolls in medical studies at the Columbia University as a pre-med student. She quits a year later, though, because her reunited parents insist she lives with them in California. At a Long Beach air show in 1920, Amelia takes her first ever plane ride. The pilot is Frank Hawks, and the ride is only 10 minutes long. Nevertheless, it would change her life completely. Working at a variety of jobs, from photographer to truck driver, she earns enough money to take flying lessons from the pioneer female aviator Anita Netta Snook. Amelia immerses herself in learning to fly. In the summer of 1922, with the financial help of her sister Muriel and her mother, Amelia purchases her first owned plane. It is a second-hand Kinner Airster biplane, painted bright yellow. She nicknames it the Canary and sets out to make a name for herself in aviation. On October 22nd, 1922, Amelia flies her plane to 14,000 feet, the world altitude record for female pilots. And on May 15th, 1923, she becomes the 16th woman to be issued a pilot's license by the world governing body for aeronautics, the Fédération Aéronautique. Following her parents' divorce, she and her mother set out on a trip across the country, starting in California and ending up in Boston, Massachusetts. By 1924, the family money runs out, and Amelia is forced to sell her plane in order to help their financial problems. In April 1928, Amelia gets an unexpected phone call from Captain Hilton H. Rayleigh, a pilot and publicity man. Would you like to fly the Atlantic? In a heartbeat, she says yes, and is soon selected to be the first woman on a transatlantic flight as a passenger. Amelia meets her promoter, George Putnam, with whom she develops a friendship.
George Palmer Putnam was a publisher, a very good publisher, and an extrovert, an entrepreneur who was famous in his own right. He had been given the job of finding a woman to fly the Atlantic in the place of Amy Guest, who had bought an airplane and planned to fly and be the first woman to fly the Atlantic. And it was her notion that she would take off from the United States, fly to London, land in the Thames in front of the Houses of Parliament, and it was going to be a gesture of friendship between the United States and England. So therefore she named the plane Friendship.
The flight is approximately 20 hours and 40 minutes long, until they touch down at Bury Point, Wales, in the United Kingdom. The Friendship team returns to the United States, greeted by a ticker tape parade in New York, and later a reception held in their honor with President Calvin Coolidge at the White House. The press dubs Amelia Lady Lindy. After this flight, Amelia becomes a media sensation and a symbol of what women could achieve. George Putnam remains her promoter during this time, publishing her 2 books, 20 Hours 30 Minutes in 1928 and The Fun of It in 1939. In 1929, she enters the first Santa Monica to Cleveland Women's Air Derby, placing 3rd, and she also helps found the 99s.
So the 99s is an organization for women pilots. It's mostly general aviation pilots and some professional pilots. And we get together and share stories and fly together. And one of the big things we try to do is encourage younger women to pursue flying.
Amelia keeps challenging herself and sets a world altitude record of 18,415 feet. She also sets off for a solo flight across North America and arrives successfully at her destination. Amelia works closely with Putnam during appearances, lectures, and other promotions, as they grow closer. In 1931, they decide to get married, even if Amelia is reluctant to marriage.
What happened is his mother bought a summer home in Noank. Yes, and so this is where it all started, and they needed a private place to come and get married because she was already a huge celebrity for flying across the Atlantic. He talked her into it. According to sources, he asked her 6 times.
Oh my.
You know, the marriage was already over between he and his wife. I go into some of the reasons she might have been reluctant. One of them was that she didn't want her to change her last name, but I think it also could have been possibly because her parents were divorced and, you know,
bad feelings about marriage.
It could be. I was just speculating in my book, you know, based on, I just wanted to do research. Why is she always saying no? You know, because they seem to get along.
Before the wedding, Amelia wants George to sign a prenuptial agreement in which he states that she shall not hold him to any medieval code of faithfulness to her, nor that she shall consider herself bound to him similarly. Without hesitation, George agrees and signs the prenup. The couple gets married on the 7th of February, 1931.
When my father married her, I was probably 8 or 9, you know. She was a busy person. She was mechanically minded and knew a lot of engineering problems, and she was a very competent lady and didn't get excited about little things. A very nice person, very capable and very knowledgeable in her field. She was always very interested in promoting women should do everything men do, period.
Throughout the rest of the year, the freshly married couple works on secret plans for Amelia to become the first woman and the second person to fly solo across the Atlantic. On May 20th, 1932, Amelia takes off in her Lockheed Vega from Harbor Grace, Newfoundland, with destination Paris, France.
I took off the famous Harbor Grace runway at dusk, about 7:30, I believe. I flew for a couple of hours while sunset lasted, and then 2 more hours as the moon came up over a bank of clouds. I had fair weather for 4 hours. Then I ran into a storm, which was one of the most severe I have ever been in. I milled around in the storm here for probably an hour, and with difficulty kept my course. I found specific thunderstorms probably 300 or 400 miles off the coast of Ireland. I believe I saw land first, about the middle. I decided to come down anyway in the best available pasture. I got down without any trouble and taxied to the front door of a surprised farmer.
The end of the long, long trail that brought immortal fame to the first woman to fly alone across the Atlantic.
The first woman to do it then, and now she's done it again, alone.
Who was the first person you saw?
The owner of the land came out. I think he was surprised to find an airplane in his front yard.
After her 13-hour trip from Harbor Grace, Miss Earhart's greeted by a pouring rain. That's gratitude.
And finally, on the steps of the clubhouse, congratulations by Mr. Andrew Mellon, the American ambassador. Well done, Lady Lindy.
After receiving a real Irish welcome, I took a Paramount plane to London, and there received a real English welcome.
Miss Earhart and Mrs. Putnam. It gives me a very great deal of pleasure to present you with this rarely conferred medal. The whole of America is proud of you and your performance.
I do thank you sincerely. I fear my exploit was not worth so great an honor.
Amelia successfully lands in Culmore, Northern Ireland, becoming the first woman and the second person to cross the Atlantic solo. On April 20th, 1933, Amelia, along with her spouse, are invited over for dinner at the White House.
So I came across this one paragraph about this evening in 1933 when Amelia Earhart spent the night at the White House and took Eleanor Roosevelt for her first night flight over Washington, D.C. Well, because the word myth was in the subtitle of the book, I thought, oh, I wonder if this is true or not. So I had the date, and I went on the next morning's AP articles and searched, and sure enough, there were the articles. There were the newspaper accounts of the previous evening.
Amelia sits on the pilot's chair, and Mrs. Roosevelt, who has recently obtained a student pilot's license, sits by her side all along this unplanned flight. After the flight, the two women and the other guests go back to the White House and enjoy their dessert. In 1934, Amelia, who has always sewn her own dresses, contributes her input to a new line of women's fashion that embodies a sleek and purposeful, yet feminine look. She names it the Amelia Earhart Fashions. On the 11th of January 1935, Amelia makes her first solo trip from Honolulu, Hawaii to Oakland, California, establishing her as the first woman as well as the first person to fly both across the Atlantic and the Pacific Oceans.
At Purdue, we were privileged to know her as a counselor, a mentor, and a friend. From 1935 through 1937, she was employed by Purdue as both a technical advisor to the Department of Aeronautics and as a career consultant to women.
Between 1930 and 1935, Amelia has set 7 women's speed and distance aviation records in a variety of aircraft. Amelia is also photographed for many different magazines and earns much fame all around the world through them. This is the peak of Amelia's career. In 1936, Amelia also begins an affair with Jean Vidal, the head of the Bureau of Air Commerce. This relationship would last for many months until they would break it off.
How about taking me along?
Well, gasoline is really more valuable than you are on a long flight.
You mean that 180 pounds of gasoline you figure would be more useful than 180 pounds of husband?
You've guessed right.
In 1937, as Amelia nears her 40th birthday, she's ready for a monumental and final challenge. She wants to be the first woman to fly around the world. Amelia purchases a Lockheed Electra L-10E plane and pulls together a top-rated crew of 3 men: Captain Harry Manning, Fred Noonan, and Paul Mantz.
Amelia Earhart in 1937 took off from Oakland, California to girdle the globe by air in the region of the equator. At that time, no man ever did it, and America's #1 feminine ace wanted to be the first human to achieve it. But the fates were against her, and though she escaped with her life, a takeoff crash in Hawaii destroyed her plane. A discouraging incident, but Miss Earhart returned to the United States, still determined to conquer the globe at its greatest circle. With her navigator, Captain Noonan, she set out to try it the other way around, flying east. She took off from Miami and flew 2/3 of the way to New Guinea, a great exploit.
Amelia and Fred set out from Papua New Guinea on July 2nd, 1937 at 12:30 a.m. and run into difficulty almost from the start. Their charts place Howland Island nearly 6 miles off its actual position.
As time passes, the situation grows more desperate.
We must be on you but cannot see you. Gas is running low. Been unable to reach you by radio.
Amelia's final message comes in at 8:43 a.m.
KHAQQ, calling Itasca. We are on the line 157337. We are running on the line north and south.
The Itasca begins an immediate search of 66 aircraft and 9 ships authorized by President Roosevelt. Nevertheless, the fate of the 2 flyers remains a mystery. On January 5th, 1939, Amelia is declared legally dead by the Superior Court in Los Angeles, without the slightest idea of what might have happened to her. It is a mystery that perhaps will go forever unsolved. A tragic but perfect ending for Amelia Earhart, is it not? A woman who was brave and who dedicated her life to adventure. How could she not leave us with a mystery? She is one of the most successful female aviators of all time. She inspires many generations of women because she tried to overcome prejudices and barriers that limited women to having equal access. She kept challenging herself and setting records that no one before had ever been capable of doing. She did more than just disappear in the Pacific. She changed history forever. Amelia Earhart is a superwoman.